It's Thursday, April 15th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. My guest for this episode is Am News senior writer Herb Boyd. He's going to be speaking with me about the police killing of 20-year-old black unarmed Daunte Wright and the ongoing trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin. Well, Minnesota is the epicenter for two high-profile police killing cases. 20-year-old Daunte Wright was fatally shot during a traffic stop by former officer Kim Potter in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, just outside Minneapolis. Potter says she meant to use her taser but pulled out her gun instead. She has since resigned from the force and is facing manslaughter charges. This happens as the trial for the former officer who killed George Floyd in 2020, Derek Chauvin, stands trial in Minneapolis. M News senior writer Herb Boyd and I wrote about both of these cases this week. Herb is on the phone with me now to discuss the latest developments. Welcome to the podcast, Herb. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, we both wrote some pretty interesting stories this week. You know, I said at the top of the show today that Minnesota just seems to be the epicenter of these police killings. We got this weekend we just had Daunte Wright shot and killed by a police officer, 20-year-old black man, father, son, everything, going on there. And then, of course, we have in the backdrop the trial of Derek Chauvin for the police killing of George Floyd. So this is just such a whirlwind going on right now. I just want to say first that, this case is just all too familiar. I was having a discussion. We were talking to Abba Rinde and I, Amsterdam news editor, and we were trying to think of a name of a police victim. And I said, it's a shame that I don't know. I should know this. And Abba's reply was, well, there's too many to remember because we keep seeing this over and over and over again. Let me get your thoughts on what you think about the trial. I got a late breaking update just now saying that the defense in former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's murder trial rests without putting him on the stand. And so that's critical to the case. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I thought that would probably be the strategy, watching how the process of the interaction, even doing the objections by the defense during the state or the prosecution's case. And I guess they figured they made all their points there. And then bringing this forensic or this pathologist who was quite compelling in his testimony, mostly bringing some new information in terms of carbon monoxide being a component, to say nothing of the hypertension, his heart condition, all these other factors. In other words, he's the defense. He's there for the defense. So he's trying to, first of all, challenge all of these other experts that have appeared for the prosecution. And for the most part, I watched all of the proceedings on court TV. I did all the morning sessions and some of the afternoon sessions because they had a lot of interruptions. And they have experts, pool reporters who came in and talked about particularly the jurors, because you can't see the jury at all on court TV or anywhere else for that matter.
Yeah.
So you don't get the reaction that they're having to some of the testimony. But I think them closing the case at this point, first of all, near the close they brought in, the prosecution brought in Philanese Floyd. This is George Floyd's brother. They brought in Shawanda Hill, who was his ex-girlfriend, and then moved toward what was it going to do with Maurice Hall, the guy who was in the car with him. Of course, they figured he was going to take a Fifth Amendment and not testify. So that's how they closed off their case, with a very personal portrait that his brother delivered, about George and what kind of individual he was. And that was very compelling. And then, of course, the defense took the case, and right away, boom, they hit in with, first of all, we got to challenge all these assertions and these particular opinions and evaluations put forth by the prosecution's witnesses. And I thought David Fowler, who was the representing the forensic pathologist representing the defense, did reasonably well. I mean, all of the commentators figured that he was very impressive. I think it could have been even better if he'd had some kind of a, like, maybe do a PowerPoint presentation or have
Yeah.
some kind of illustrations to show, because some of that stuff he was talking about was very, very intricate in terms of the heart and how it operated, the flow of blood, dealing with adrenaline and ventricles and stuff like that. Some illustrations would have maybe drove that point home, but otherwise, bringing in the carbon monoxide and talking about the hypertension, those are very, very critical information that the jury will have to weigh.
Yeah, and a lot of information is out there. We've seen the trial day by day. I've been watching it. I'm working from home like a lot of folks, and having this and watching this obviously because I want to keep up with what's going on. The medical pathologist that spoke about the exhaust, I just thought that was interesting because it's like if he was there for 9 minutes, if you knew that exhaust was there, you'd think that he would get up. We're seeing so many. It looks like a blatant, obvious open and shut case here, but it just feels like, the way that the American justice system has worked for the black community, for black America, we might not get what we want, even though it's just right there. There's a video. The interesting thing, again, with both of these cases, with both Derek Chauvin, with George Floyd and Daunte Wright, both of these were on video. So there's no question. We see what happened from start to finish. Literally, from start to finish, we saw what happened. Videos of both of these incidents. So there's no question out there. Is this an open and shut case? I mean, do you think we will get what we want? I mean, again, a lot of people were what I feel like with the Derek Chauvin case is that a lot of people felt they saw the video and America was just such in a bad place with COVID-19 and there was this outpouring of sympathy for George Floyd. But here's the thing. A year's passed since it happened, almost a year's passed rather, since it's happened. Tempers are calmed down. We have a new president in office. Things are a little different now. What are your thoughts on the outcome? Because I think that's the thing also that people want to get out of this is what the outcome is going to be.
Well, so much would depend on. Are you talking about the Derek Chauvin situation or
yes, Derek Chauvin,
Daunte Wright?
Derek Chauvin.
The Derek Chauvin situation is going to play out. The cause of death is going to be critical in this case, as they made that reference right from the beginning that, was his death attributed to the fact that there's pressure on his neck, and that led to his death. So that's where the various death certificates were filed, the coroner's report, the medical officers. Some of them contending, Andrew Baker in particular, said that his death, that's a homicide. So, but then the defense is saying no, you got to bring the implication of drugs into the situation, and now this last forensic pathologist who put forth the carbon monoxide as well as hypertension, in other words, pre-existing conditions that he had. So those are going to be critical factors for the jury. You got a half and half in terms of 6 African Americans. There are 3 women, I'm sure, and then the other half of it being white or mixed. They're not sure about that, but if all you need is 1 or 2, and it's always this question of hey, reasonable, the intent and all those kind of things that are going to be raised, and so the jury might ask for some additional reports. Sometimes the jury is so conflicted and so divided that you can have 1 or 2 individuals on there that can take a stand and disrupt the whole process, So we'll see how that plays out. We've seen too many cases, where police officers trying to even indict them is a challenge, and then trying to convict them is even more difficult. And in terms of how that case is represented. So we'll see how that plays out in a very similar way with Daunte Wright situation, where it's not as much evidence there, because with the George Floyd thing, you got all kind of footage coming from 3 or 4 different directions there.
Absolutely.
And so it's a matter of which has the most weight, and how you begin to argue the scientific aspects of it in terms of pressure on his neck, how big the cop was, how long he was held. And that was the thing that, Josh, that was not brought out in the I thought that the prosecution would object to some of what forensic pathologist Fowler had to say, because nothing was ever said about how long the pressure was there. So that's something that will probably come up in the closing arguments. So we'll see how that plays out.
Absolutely. You were talking about evidence from all angles. With the Derek Chauvin situation with George Floyd, we have the video, we have witnesses, multiple angles, even angles that we're now just seeing that are being shown in this case during the trial. And so you're right, we have it's like just a pouring of various angles and evidence that we're seeing from that case. But I want to shift now to Daunte Wright. I actually wrote about that story this week. And of course, the latest is that former police officer Kim Porter, she resigned, and she is facing second-degree manslaughter charges and is looking at 10 years in prison. I'm seeing all over the internet. I just want to say that I just don't understand how you can not know the difference between a gun and a taser. They both look different. Your officers know which side. I spoke to, who did I speak to this week? I spoke to somebody this week. I can't remember who it was. And, they were telling me about how, it's very hard to not know the difference or not know where you're pulling from. And so that excuse of, I didn't know that I had my, and we hear her say taser, taser, taser. So it's no question that that's what she meant to pull out there, but she pulled out the gun. So it just really the intention is just all there. The intention alone, is there in that case. What do you think we're going to see here? I'll say this. I'm actually surprised. We got a charge, manslaughter, second degree manslaughter. She's facing 10 years, but what do you think is going to go on here? What do you think about this case?
Well, one of the things about how fast they put the video out there, because remember with the George Floyd situation, it took a while before we begin to see that video. This one was done almost immediately, and Tim Gannon, who's the chief who resigned, and of course Kim Potter, the woman who shot Daunte, she resigned, and even the city manager there, he resigned. I don't know if they fired him or he resigned.
Yeah, I heard something. Yeah, I heard he's not there. I heard I think they fired him. I'm not sure, but we'll check on that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of administrative shakeups that are going on there, and of course it's hard to not see the connection because you're talking about the proximity. 10, 15 miles away for where George Floyd situation in Minneapolis, and then in the Brooklyn Center, in the suburbs out there. So you got the territorial similarity. You've got the incident, of course, with George Floyd is clearly, you can see the pressure there. And now we can talk about an accident. I mean, good gracious. And we've had similar cases like that. If you look back, it's at least, I recall, even in Tulsa, Oklahoma, remember they had the one out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Robert Bates and Eric Harris, who was killed, and it was a mistaken situation in terms of taser. Say nothing of Oscar Grant out in California. Same kind of situation where how are you going to mistake a taser for the gun? And the case that they had in, I think it was in Rochester, Minnesota, a similar case where the cop mistook his taser for the gun because they changed. Remember, the taser used to be a little device.
Yeah, I remember.
It wasn't shaped like a gun at all, and then they changed that. And I thought that was just a terrible move to make, because they have enough problem there under pressure and how they react in terms of their training and everything. And oddly enough, Kim Potter, the woman involved here, was in the training process. I mean, how are you going to have a trainer who has not the qualifications or the disposition to really instruct anybody how to do anything, end up being the assassin, the assaulter here? So that's another irony of the whole situation. But I think that what's going to happen with this case is that you'll have the similar kind of situation in terms of, I remember one before, the situation in Rochester. The officer imposed the whole qualified immunity, which is kind of ironic in the sense that what we've been doing on qualified immunity, and that was one of the protective measures brought by the officer Gregory Seam, who shot the individual in Rochester, but the judge kicked that out. Said, no, you can't. The difference between the taser and your weapon is so absolutely different.
It's very different. They feel different. They look different. The color's different. They're on different sides. And the fact that she was a training officer is even more disturbing. 26 years on the
Mm-hmm.
force. So this was not, I mean, it doesn't really matter how much experience she had, whether she was a rookie or she's 26 years. But the 26 years and the fact that she trained other officers and was training one at the time of the killing is
That's
just,
something.
it's something. It's just, it's unbelievable. So, the intention is there. And we often talk about, and Imhotep, Gary Bird and I, we do the show on the weekends. You're on there a lot of times with us. And we talk a lot. We've talked over the years about underlying racial, motives and how that works and how a lot of these officers need to go through a racial test. And this is kind of might be an example of that here. Meant to pull out my taser, but pulled out my gun. Why is your mind going there? It's very interesting. Just wanted to clarify that city manager was fired. That was
Okay.
that city manager. Let me get the name here. It was Kurt Boganey. He was the city manager, and he was fired for some statements that he said about quote the city employee will receive due process, and that's all he could say. So just wanted to
Here's
clarify
a black
that.
man. Yeah,
Right.
I
Was
saw
was
him on
fired
the
for
air.
that. Yeah. Absolutely. I do want you to talk about briefly, you and Damaso Reyes, who's one of our other freelance writers that's working with us at the Amsterdam News, have been doing a series. In fact, I think it's ended, correct? It's 3 parts about qualified immunity. I know it's been a lot of buzz that we've been talking about at the Amsterdam News among the staff. It's a very detailed, long stories that you guys have been doing. Tell us about qualified immunity, what that is, and what you guys are talking about.
Well, we kind of brought it to a close. I'm not sure. I haven't seen today's paper. I don't think it was published.
Yeah. It was published.
It's there?
It's also online, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll have to
there.
check it out. What kind of illustration did they have, Josh?
I know that the in the one for today, for this week rather, we there was a chart that was sent to us that I had posted with the story, but if there's a change, we'll definitely change it. But go ahead.
I had requested that they use the image of an officer behind a shield that's been fractured.
Oh, okay.
And cracked. I thought that would be an image that we could use for part 3.
Yeah.
But whether that's not here or there. What we're trying to do is explain the history of it, and we needed 3 parts. Originally, we thought maybe 4 parts, but then we said we could probably wrap this up in 3 parts, depending on how long each of the installments were. And we figured coming in 2,500, 3,000 words was just about could do the job for us. And so we went back historically, and a lot of stuff that's happening, we just talk about this whole situation with, the mistaken gun for a taser and how that qualified immunity came into play with the case back in 2002. So it's something that's been out there for a while, but in fact, it goes all the way back because it morphed from out of a Civil Rights Act of 1871, Josh. It go all the way back when it was first put in place, where it was mostly protected against people who had been assaulted by the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
And the charges could be brought against them. And then over the years, you see it went through the corporate thing and people using it as a shield. And finally, the police officers grabbed onto it in terms of defending themselves against liability. And in other words, any kind of brutality against an individual that was a violation of their constitutional rights, they had a reason to bring a lawsuit and sue these officers. And the officers, of course, bring up their qualified immunity. It was justified. We was following policies and procedures. And, in terms of probable cause, all those kind of things are brought into play. The 14th Amendment, all these different kind of issues that play over the years in terms of qualified immunity. So what we did was kind of weigh both sides of it and end up with where we bring in experts and everything, and we've interviewed quite a few people out there who've been doing extensive research on qualified immunity for years, including Joanna Schwartz, out of California, Amir Ali with the ACLU. We brought all these different voices in, and in fact, we're planning to do a show on Monday. We'll be talking to...
Yeah, you're doing a live event, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be talking with them about some of the findings and the prospects. What do we see down the road on this whole issue? Because now you have, three states who have made very, very definitive moves to remove qualified immunity as a shield for these police officers who violate citizens' constitutional rights. Connecticut, Colorado, New Mexico, and right here in New York City, we focused on New York City. You know how Corey Johnson, the speaker there, led that whole push to make sure the cops can use that as a shield.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what we're doing there with that, with these three parts. And I'll take a look at the third part and see exactly how they vetted that one.
Yeah. Just want to give some late developments about the Daunte Wright case. The family is saying now that the arresting of the cop and the charging of the cop is a good first step, a good initial step. And we're getting information from the Brian Peters, who is the executive director of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, who said that Daunte Wright's death wouldn't have happened. He's blaming the death on noncompliance. And we hear that a lot. I hear that all the time from people. And even a few people that I've spoken to said, well, if he hadn't done this, if he hadn't done that, if he hadn't whatever, he wouldn't have been shot and killed. Well, okay, whatever. But at the same time, this officer made an alleged mistake, but deadly force, there's no, that's not a death sentence to me. People say that all the time, non-compliance. We hear that all the time. They don't do what they're told, do what you're told, do what you're told. For some reason, we always have to do what we're told, black people, when it comes to the police. But there's numerous videos and situations that we see out there where white folks are not doing what they're told, but it's a whole different story. But when it's us, there's two sets of rules, and that's the thing that we always have that comes up, is that there's a set of rules for white America and a set of rules for black America, and that's kind of what happened here. We're also seeing the uprising that's happening. I'm sure you've seen that over the last several days in Minnesota. Again, with this, I think this is the fourth day where they've had uprisings and situations happening in Minnesota when it comes to police shooting. Here's the thing. I never realized Minnesota was like this, but, we're seeing two cases not far from each other. And then did you know this? I was told yesterday by our staff, by my coworker, staff writer Stefan Johnson, that George Floyd's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend was a teacher to Daunte Wright. So even that connection alone, these two brothers are connected. Same state, knew some of this. I mean, just even through that alone, we're seeing a connection there. But and we're also seeing.
Also, Josh,
go ahead,
there's a connection. There's a connection also in terms of what precipitated the encounter, because in both cases, it may be a situation where the victims were unaware of certain kind of things. For example, George Floyd, was he aware that the $20 bill was counterfeit?
Right.
Okay, because that brought the cops into his life. Did Daunte Wright, was he aware that he had a court date, a warrant for his arrest?
Right.
Because his the public defender stepped up and said he hadn't been notified that he had a court date.
Right.
But I think something has to be said about traffic stops.
Yeah, we've been dealing with that, driving while black. Exactly, absolutely. We've been dealing with that for decades, for years.
Goodness. Sandra Bland, remember?
Right,
Sandra Bland,
since the car was invented, black people we've been dealing with this driving while black situation where we get pulled over and the outcome is always something much higher than it needs to be. And so, they're always running our numbers to see, what's going on with us, and if they find a warrant, fine. If they don't, whatever. But at the same time, none of that, because I keep hearing that over and over again, noncompliance. He didn't do what he was told. Just like the situation in Virginia with that police officer, who, by the way, we do have a story about that on our front page this week. You can check out that story on amsterdamnews.com. Had to throw that in there because it was a pretty big story. But again, two situations where a vehicle stop was involved, and the outcome was not good. And in the worst outcome happening to Daunte Wright, where he was killed. And so again, we keep revisiting this over and over again. Driving while black happens over and over again.
And then Josh talking about it was a mistake. That you check out our editorial this week in the paper.
Right, you did write an editorial about.
In terms of talking about
Absolutely.
These mistakes that are made by police officers. We look at Amadou Diallo. They thought it was a mistake. They thought he was reaching for his gun. He was reaching for his wallet. The Tamir Rice, he had a toy gun. You dig it? So we can go on and on with the Oscar Grant situation. People where cops misunderstand. In other words, their thing is to shoot first and ask questions later.
Exactly.
And that is just absolutely devastating when it comes to African American, but young black men out there.
Yes,
and of course, people say, well, if they'd had complied, if they'd have gone along with, the commands and demands of these police officers, they may be alive. But there's no guarantee, even in police custody, that you're going to survive. Well, and that's what Carol Taylor did in her book, her little black book, in terms of young men's survival in this society and going along with it. There's no guarantee. Sandra Bland is a very good illustration that even in police custody, you could end up dead, although the circumstances around her death remain kind of, it's so very opaque. We're not clear about it.
We still don't know. We still have many questions. But
was it suicide or what?
Right. But it just always harks back, you were saying again, the non-compliance, but we're always dealt with so aggressively because the stereotypes are out there. These white officers have these stereotypes about black men. Whenever there's a situation, traffic stop. I mean, I'm thinking about it's been so many. There was another traffic stop where a black man was killed in New Jersey in that traffic stop. And so that was last year, where a black man was shot there. But we're always seen as the aggressor. It's this underlying racism. I mean, here's the thing. Again, I go back to the gun and the taser. I mean, you know what side the tasers are on. You know what side the gun is on. Why would you say you said the word taser, you meant to pull it out, but you pulled out the gun? There's a disconnect there. There's something wrong there. And again, black men and women as well are seen as just overly aggressive by these white police officers who come into our communities, into our neighborhoods, or even when we're not, according to some folks, we're not where we need to be, but we're always seen as the aggressor. And I think that is the underlying issue here, that a lot of these officers have this underlying racism, which allows them to mistake tasers for guns. That's just what I think.
Okay. Well, sometimes come in there with malice aforethought. And that's amazing that they don't do a bit more winnowing out individuals who have this potential racist reaction. The systemic racism is so deep inside of them. The white supremacist reactions are so deep. They can weed them out before they put a uniform and give them a gun. Yeah. Because then they're absolutely lethal in their approach to young black men out there who they see as like less than human. Right. And so, that's one of the what you call underlying and suspicious pre-existing conditions. Yeah. No doubt about it, Josh.
Yeah. And they just, they see us as subhuman, sub-people. And again, they just see us as the aggressor. And that's why we always say Black Lives Matter. So it's got to always say
Black Lives Matter. Got to keep pushing that.
Absolutely. Well, listen,
well, okay. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Okay, baby. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.